This is Dan Yurman at the American Nuclear Society Chicago Convention, and we're talking with three women in nuclear about the role of women in the nuclear energy industry. And my question to you is, what is the top question that you think about in your off hours about the role of women in nuclear? What bubbles to the top?
We need more of them. There aren't enough women in nuclear energy, and the more we have, the more we will get, and the better we will communicate with the world in general.
Gwyneth?
Well, I agree with what Mimi is saying, that we need to, first of all, I think the women who are currently participating in the nuclear world need to reach out to girls in the Girl Scouts and, you know, other campfire girls or whatever, grade school and so on, and talk about things like energy and the environment and nuclear power, and just make it clear that this is a world that women can go into and be successful in.
And I guess I would broaden that out, that women in technical fields and engineering in general continues to be a struggle to get women to become engineers and scientists and to keep them in those roles. We find that 30 years, I graduated from college 30 years ago, and it was about 10% women then, and it's still somewhere between 10 and 15% women, and that's a struggle for us. There seems to be a continuing, girls get diverted off of these technical tracks before they get to college, and so then we lose them, and then they continue to be diverted off those tracks once they get, even after they graduated. So we find that there's still a lack of diversity in the workforce in terms of gender.
Well, all of you seem to agree on the same thing, so the next question is, what should be done?
There's a lot that can be done. You know, first is start early. You know, my firm has done a lot of work for the National Science Foundation in terms of how do you bring women and minorities into science and engineering, STEM fields essentially. And what we've learned is that you really have to start in grade school to get people excited about science, which then brings them into engineering disciplines as they get into college. Getting women excited about science, whether it's through mentoring programs, visiting speakers, Girl Scout badges, opens up a pipeline of women into science and engineering disciplines that'll move into the nuclear energy industry.
Gwyneth?
Well, I'm just thinking about all kinds of programs, after-school programs and so on, that could be developed by, I guess, volunteers like us in our spare time or whatever, but just to encourage girls to feel they are competent and capable and able to do science, and that cooking, by the way, is a science. Mm-hmm. It's chemistry and so on. So there are many ways you could approach it, and to expose kids to science museums and science events and so on. And it seems to me that there's a kind of a movement that I just sort of detect online and so on, that to make science fun, interesting, hip, cool. Yeah. These TV shows about The Big Bang Theory, about geeks and so on. Mm-hmm. That it's much more acceptable as a pursuit maybe than it ever has been. I'm not sure whether that pays off in terms of numbers of engineers graduating, women engineers, but I think we have to think ahead. And we really need women to go into these fields because they bring a certain kind of way of thinking and empathy and so on that is very important to bring into technology too.
I'll take a slightly different tack. We know we need to catch girls young and get them in, but one of the things we also need to do is encourage women to stay in a technical track once they get into industry. I was considered a complete oddball moving through management as a woman and moving into management, being an engineering manager, and staying in engineering. What what I saw tended to happen, and I think it happens at a lot of companies, is they see women with leadership potential and they want to move them up quickly into management ranks, and so they're pulled out of engineering and into support roles in quality or sourcing or HR or other places where they think they can get promoted quicker, and they're not encouraging them to really become deep technically and be the technical people and the technical experts. And then we lose that long-term leadership models of having people that are engineering leaders that are female later in their careers, and that's unfortunate.
And we also don't get reinforcement.
Right.
I have a friend who's in a fairly senior position at a national lab, and she happens to be very attractive. And one of the top managers that she was intersecting with said to her, well, you know, I don't really see how I can take you seriously. You're way too pretty. And talk about deflation.
Yeah, and I had people tell me once I would never get married and have kids because I was far too technical. I'm not sure what the two had to do with each other, but, you know, and we can all tell those stories, but encouraging women to be technical and to communicate about their careers is really important, and not to be so hung up on we want to make women into leaders and we're going to pull them off into a track that we think will fast track them into a leadership role. Sometimes means that you've got that many fewer role models that girls can look at and go, I could do that. And that could be really fun as a career. Look, she travels all over the world and she does this really interesting stuff, and this isn't maybe so scary.
Well, is it important then for there to be role models for young women to look up to?
I really think there is. It's a little bit of a cultural thing in that I remember as a little girl, what I wanted to be more than anything else was an astronaut. Girls were not allowed to be astronauts in the 1960s and the early 70s when I was of an age. Turns out I'm also blind as a bat, so I could never have been an astronaut. Anyway, but I didn't know that. All I knew was that there were no girl astronauts, and when I would sit up at school and say, I want to be an astronaut, guess what? I got laughed at. I was also the only girl in computer club, so clearly it didn't bother me too much. But it not having that person I could look at. I thought I was going to be a math teacher when I grew up because I thought that's what girls that were good at math and science did. They became teachers. Thank God I had a male teacher who pulled me aside and said, are you insane? You should become an engineer. Or this kid would have been teaching math at a high school somewhere in Iowa.
One last question. The young girls in grade school and junior high school today probably have never lived without a computer in the home or a cell phone. Is technology today more enabling for women to go into engineering professions, or are there other factors that make more of a difference?
I think it is more enabling. And just referring, we were talking, Gwyneth, I think, mentioned something about sciences becoming cooler and for young women and girls. And I think part of the reason it's becoming cooler is because we've got this technology that makes it more accessible. And it's all right to be, in fact, it's pretty cool to be a little geeky.
Well, this is several years ago now, or a couple of decades ago. I remember talking to a teacher in Albuquerque who said that girls were now going into math and science classes more because of pocket calculators. Mm-hmm. They had this fear of math. And if I'd had a pocket calculator, maybe I would be a scientist today, but I didn't, and I just gave up on the math part. But that apparently has enabled girls to, continue with their chemistry studies or whatever, and go on to the university and major in sciences. So there have to be more females in the sciences than there ever have been before. Maybe the numbers aren't going up in the nuclear engineering world, but when I've spoken at engineering departments, nuclear engineering departments around the country, there are a lot of young women. Some of them are going to do health physics, and they're not going to do engineering, but there's a lot of, I went to the Atlanta ANS youth, the youth student conference last year, and it was full of girls. There were a lot of young women some of them look like they were teenagers. I'm not quite sure how old they were, but teens, 20s, very young,
Yeah.
vigorous,
Yeah.
smart, beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you want?
Yeah, it's getting better. The frustration is that in a lot of cases, a lot of the young women I talk to seem to think that they have to excel totally at math, and that they don't understand that sometimes the answer is you just got to get it. You don't have to ace it. You just got to get it, and so that's the lack of a role model that can turn to them and say, no. You just got to get it. You don't have to be a math major in math to become an engineer. There's a little bit of a barrier there because I think it's still a little bit of a cultural game that goes on in the lower grades with girls aren't, unless they really excel at math, their teachers aren't encouraging them to be engineers. You know, I've gone into lots of classrooms and said, how many people like to do crossword puzzles? How many people like to solve logic problems? How many people like to do Sudoku? And these other things that don't directly require mathematical skills. And a lot of girls go, oh, I like those things. It's like, you'll be a great engineer because you like to solve problems, and that's what engineers do. But there's this little bit of a misconception that unless you're just outstanding at math, somehow you can't be an engineer.
I'd like to thank you very much. We've been talking with Mimi Limbach, Gwyneth Cravens, and Margaret Harding about women in nuclear. This is Dan Yurman at the American Nuclear Society Conference in Chicago.